The modern spiritual landscape is a disorganized, chaotic jumble. We live in an era where occultism, psychology, and vague mysticism are freely mixed and marketed as equal paths to enlightenment. At the root of this chaos is a specific error in how we define reality. We assume that anything invisible, psychologically abnormal, or deeply emotional must automatically be categorized as spiritual. This error has given rise to movements like the occultists and theosophists, figures who reduce high esoteric doctrines to the pursuit of mere psychic powers and aesthetic roleplay. Simultaneously, academic Orientalists and historians make a similar error from the outside. They observe rigorous, active esoteric methods, like Islamic tasawwuf, and wrongly reduce them to the passive, religious category of mysticism. Clearing away these false categorizations is necessary. Mixing up the purely psychic phenomena of the mind with genuine spiritual realization blinds us to the actual mechanics of metaphysical reality. The French philosopher René Guenon strictly diagnosed this modern confusion. His work sought to cut through the noise and restore the exact traditional definition of metaphysics. Guenon was uncompromising about what initiation is not. It is not an elevated form of moral education. It is not a subjective mystical swoon, and it is absolutely not an experiment in psychic powers. Authentic initiation is a rigorous, objective, ontological transmission. Its singular design is to push the individual beyond the human state entirely. To understand how this works, we have to map the exact mathematical mechanics of this transmission and prove why the concept of self-initiation is an absolute impossibility. Guénon's framework replaces vague spiritual feelings with a rigid structural model, elevating tradition from personal belief to an exact science. This two-dimensional grid represents the foundational concept of Guénon's ontology, the domain of the individual human state. In magic and occultism, we see strictly lateral movements. Practitioners manipulate subtle forces, but remain entirely trapped on the horizontal human plane. This horizontal expansion holds zero initiatic value. Attempting to force these individual possibilities outward only brings severe risks of psychic disequilibrium. We can map mysticism on this exact same plane. It is an exclusively religious, passive state. The individual receives an influence, but their ontological status does not change. They remain pinned to the human condition. The mystic is characterized by this passivity. They lack a specific method and doctrinal preparation. The esoteric initiate, by contrast, must assume a necessary active posture. The true esoteric path is an upward, super-individual trajectory. It pierces the human plane and breaks out of the human state. True spiritual progress is exclusively vertical. Expanding horizontally through magic or passive mysticism only traps the individual in a wider psychic cage. We can view the esoteric journey through a cosmological metaphor. It mimics the creation of the universe itself, starting from a raw, unformed substance. The first required condition for realization is potentiality, the materia prima. An individual must possess a natural, innate aptitude for the work. Not everyone is biologically or metaphysically initiable. This reality dismantles the myth of self-initiation. A person possessing raw potential cannot actualize it on their own, just as a seed cannot grow in total darkness without sunlight. That requires the second condition, virtuality. There must be a fiat lux, an explicit transmission of a non-human spiritual influence from outside the individual. This external transmission provides the specific illumination that transforms raw potential into a virtuality, making it ready to be developed. The third condition is actuality. The light is only a catalyst. The initiate must perform active, methodical inner work, ensuring every element snaps into place. This active, rigorous geometric building process stands in stark contrast to the mystic strategy of merely waiting passively for visions to arrive. Authentic initiation is a precise triad. It requires natural qualification, ignited by an external non-human transmission, culminating in relentless active realization. This presents a critical mechanical question. If the fiat lux is a non-human spiritual influence, how is it actually delivered to a human individual? This diagram illustrates the silsila, the traditional initiatic chain of transmission. The organization passing this influence acts solely as a conduit. The human initiator is merely a vessel for a non-human current flowing sequentially down the chain. The consequence of a broken chain is absolute. If an organization loses its regular succession, its rites become completely void, no matter how perfectly performed. Modern pseudo-initiatic groups, such as self-declared Rosicrucians or occult societies, often try to bypass this rule by claiming an ideal attachment to extinct traditions. Simply appropriating ancient aesthetics or copying rituals out of books cannot transmit spiritual influence. A group cannot give what it does not actually possess. Without an unbroken, documented traditional chain anchored to a non-human origin, all initiatic rituals are merely theatrical parodies. The strictness of this transmission exposes the specific modern temptation of mixing and matching different spiritual practices to speed up the process of enlightenment. We can visualize the relationship between different orthodox traditional forms through Guenon's mountain metaphor. Distinct, separate pathways start at the base and lead upward. Syncretism is the profane, external juxtaposition of rites from different traditions by someone who has not yet reached the goal. When an individual engages in syncretism on the slopes of the mountain, they cut across distinct pathways, forcing incompatible mechanisms to operate simultaneously. The result is psychic clashes. Incompatible influences collide within the individual, causing severe spiritual disequilibrium and distinct psychological danger. True synthesis is the exact opposite of syncretism. It is an internal realization of unity, not an external mixing of disparate parts. Synthesis is only possible for the initiate who has reached the apex of the mountain, the singular point where all distinct traditional forms finally converge into a single principle. Syncretism is a horizontal error that creates chaos and psychological damage. Synthesis is the ultimate vertical achievement that reveals the underlying metaphysical unity. Looking at this entire structure, the complete paradigm comes into focus. Authentic initiation is not a subjective emotional state. It is a precise, objective science of spiritual realization governed by absolute laws. It operates exclusively through a triad of requirements: strict natural qualification, an unbroken traditional transmission, and active inner work. This rigorous, gate-kept reality directly opposes the modern world's obsession with democratic, egalitarian spirituality designed for everyone. The traditionalist school demands we accept the hard truth of the matter. True initiation is inherently hierarchical and exclusive, constrained by the strict reality of qualification. The ultimate goal of the vertical axis is specific, moving entirely beyond the conditioned human state to achieve what tradition calls the supreme identity. Because of its mechanical requirements, this structural reality definitively refutes modern New Age movements, self-help spirituality, and self-proclaimed gurus. Guenon diagnosed this profound metaphysical decay in the modern West, providing the exact tools required to differentiate psychic illusions from actual tradition. We are left with a clear intellectual challenge: accept the stringent, exacting laws of metaphysical reality, or abandon the claim to true initiation altogether. In an age dominated by synthetic spirituality and horizontal psychic phenomena, the unbroken traditional path remains the singular vertical escape from the human condition.